welcome back to another episode of the Growth Hacking Culture podcast. Today, I want to dive into a topic that is affecting millions around the world, and it's about burnout. And here's the thing, we live in a culture that glorifies hustle and constant productivity. We are bombarded with life hacks and optimization strategies, promising to squeeze every last drop of efficiency out of our day. What if this relentless pursuit of productivity is actually fueling the burnout fire? And that's what I would like to understand today. Joining us is Marisol Solarte-Erlacher, a therapist specializing in stress, resilience, and burnout. And I'm pretty sure that I have missed a couple of things because she has a profile that is, I'm so envious of your profile, by the way. So I was saying, you work not only in burnout, not only at the individual level, but also at the organizational level, which is something that really attracts me a lot because that's my area of passion, and I love discussing about that. We are so glad that you're here. In this episode, we will be debunking some common productivity myths, what we believe,
Mhm. Mhm.
uncovering the hidden causes of burnout, and most importantly, sharing practical strategies to help you achieve your goals without sacrificing your well being. So, if you're
Yes.
ready to learn how to work smarter, not harder, and finally break free from the burnout cycle, let's start. Marisol, thank you very much for spending time with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Regarding your profile, let's dig back to your profile. So, because I'm pretty
Sure.
sure that I have summarized it in an awful manner, the breadth of knowledge and experience that you have. So, not everybody from psychology is moving into the burnout area. Not
hmm
everybody has this motivation to help people more rather than with the therapy, but more with the coaching way. How did it
hmm
happen for you?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting progression. So it's almost like these two paths were intersected at the perfect time. So I've been a therapist for the past 20 years. So my primary focus has been working with adults who have some form of developmental trauma. So I do a lot of work around very complex trauma and very difficult, I think, past experiences for adults. And I've done that my whole career. And in 2020, when the pandemic started, I had friends who were executive directors and CEOs reach out to me and ask me if I'd be willing to come and talk to their organizations about the stress that they were experiencing related to the pandemic. And, I was like, absolutely, I'll do it. Because really and truly, a lot of what I do in my individual work is based on how people's nervous systems respond to difficult experiences. And and so it's really just looking at how people in an organization, how their nervous system is being impacted and how you help them start to reorganize and start to change some of the behaviors that they have in order to be able to make the work sustainable and then also to overcome some of the stressors that can impact them.
Mm. Marisol, I want to just to have a little bit more of understanding of trauma because back in the days where I didn't know shit about anything on psychology, which was
Uh-huh.
not that far away, 7 years ago, Ivan Palomino was somewhere in navigating in the corporate world and didn't apply any psychological knowledge to my day-to-day work. So trauma, when and based on also on discussions that I had with other people, trauma, people imagine someone who is almost in a state of shock,
hmm
instead of understanding that a person who acts normally, the behaviors are with the standard of the population, you might have a trauma. What is the definition of this trauma thing?
Yeah. So the way that I define trauma, and I think it's probably the simplest way, it's typically a difficult experience that changes what we know about ourselves and the world around us. So we could have a traumatic experience and not be traumatized by it.
Mhm.
It really, because it's really about how we interact or engage with that traumatic experience that the event becomes traumatizing or it just becomes another experience. So a better way to think about it is, I could get into a car accident, and that could be a very traumatizing experience. Just the event alone is traumatizing. If I feel alone, unsupported, in some ways I start to have difficult experiences after that accident, that event could become much more traumatizing for me. It could become a trauma in my life. If I have a supportive community, if I have an early intervention, I get the support that I need and have the resources to be able to overcome some of those challenges, that might not become a trauma for me. It might just become a difficult experience that I had. So it really depends on how the interventions that we have in the moment, our resources, our past trauma, and the ways that we're able to get the support that we need that can make an experience traumatizing.
And then I'm thinking loud, can then
Yeah,
a burnout experience become a trauma?
absolutely. I mean, it's really connected because part of burnout is just moving in a state of chronic state for too long. It's almost like your nervous system is maxed out. It's on high alert for an extended period of time. And that's similar to chronic trauma, is that when we have a difficult experience, we don't resolve it, and then we live in that state of either chronic, what is called hypervigilance or hyperarousal, or we live in a state of shutdown where we just feel shut down to our own lives. Then, that's the state that we live in chronically. That leads to burnout.
Mm. I now that we are discussing a little bit more about burnout, so the one of the core causes or root causes that produces burnout is this story about people showing off about that they are busy,
Yeah.
and in many cultures it becomes like this is how I am productive, how I'm participate into the society. Think about Japanese, think about the Americans, for
Yeah.
instance. So, uh, how does this mindset really contribute to this epidemic that has happened?
Oh,
Because still, despite the fact that there was a little bit of improvements like 2 years ago, I think we're back to normal, right? To the same
Oh,
level of stress.
absolutely. Hmm. Well, I'll say I know for myself when the pandemic started, I I thought, well, I don't know really what's going to happen with the profession of mental health because I typically would see clients in person, and we didn't really we had some of the virtual world of therapy or telehealth, but not as it's it's so much more propagated now due to the pandemic. We have access to it. And what happened was I thought, well, this could be the end of my clinical career, the end of my practice. And the opposite happened. Like everyone needed mental health services. And so what I did, even knowing very, as a mental health professional, that overworking is going to lead to terrible consequences. And I overworked myself over the pandemic and I really had to make some significant life changes. And I think part of it, I think there is the cultural, I think pressure around busyness, and we tend to glorify busyness. We think that busyness is a mark of how well we're doing, how effective we are in community. And I think there are lots of reasons why that's true. I think also because we've been socialized that way. We grew up in a culture where we believe the harder you work, the better things get,
Mm,
which is not really that true. Sometimes it is, but not always. We tend to disconnect just from our own nervous system. We don't listen to the signals of our body to tell us to rest, to recharge. We constantly push past our limits and we just think that we keep doing it, then eventually things will get better. And we get stuck in a cycle. And it actually undermines any type of sustainability and our ability to actually be productive and effective. Like, and when we're living in that constant state, we actually are being less productive.
mm. But it's difficult to get rid of this belief because we have been programmed by not only by us, our society in certain cultures, and I take my culture, a mix between Jewish people, a mix of Latino people. So being an
Yeah.
engineer, being a doctor, you have to do it. You
Yeah.
have to be busy. You have to have activities. Otherwise, you
Mhm.
are nothing. You are going to end up in a gang. There is no gangs in Switzerland, by the way, but anyways. It's difficult to deprogram yourself because this constant repetition has created a way of looking at the world.
hmm
Is, is there a
hmm
way to deprogram yourself? Even by
hmm
knowing people, in fact, I know a lot of leaders that I have been discussing with, they tell me, yes, I know that I have to rest, I have to take more often time with my family, but they don't do it because it
Right.
is a ritual, a habit that they have in their lives. Is there a way to
Absolutely.
deprogram it?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think part of it really has to do with being able to set boundaries, being able to tune into yourself more, and then understanding that we typically, whatever we believe productivity is, like whatever we want to accomplish, probably more accomplished with less time and like more free time. And I think it's just partly just shifting our mindset around this idea that the more that I do, the more effective I am, the more people see that I'm working hard. And in reality, the less we work, the more productive we are because we're recharging our body's ability, like our resources. It's almost like if we have a car that's running on empty, the time that actually happened to me this morning, there's more anxiety and more stress, right? Like this idea of like, oh my gosh, I have like 2 more miles left and I have to keep going, or whatever that is. A car without fuel is not going to run, and it's going to eventually there's going to be an end to it, right? It's going to peter out. And I think similarly with us as human beings, we constantly push ourselves past the limit. And there are not only the short-term consequences, but the long-term consequences of chronic stress. Like there will be an end, even if it's not in this moment, it impacts your whole physiology. So it impacts every part of your system, not just the stress that you feel, but it's impacting your organs, it's impacting your heart, it's impacting your digestive system. And so there are significant long-term impacts to running in that state for a long time.
This problem or this challenge that people have with productivity, it comes from its definition itself. Somehow I have the impression that it is about the time that we spend in a single task or the
Yeah,
level of efforts that I'm doing for that single task.
yeah.
Is there a way to redefine to redesign this definition of productivity?
Yeah, because I think it's not about, I think we have this idea that productivity is about constant output. Like I'm constantly outputting. The more I produce, the more that I'm productive. But it's really about just creating sustainable systems that help you be well and to help you have longevity in whatever it is that you want to do. And I think part of it is like we don't correlate our emotional life with productivity. We're just kind of like, let me just think about that later. Let me push off how I feel, or if I'm tired or hungry or sad or irritated or, whatever it is, I'll push that off and I won't think about it. But actually, your emotional life is a really important signal and helps you become more effective and create more effective systems in order to be productive. So if I'm listening to myself and I can say, I'm really tired, I need to step away, take a break and come back, I'm typically going to be more productive. But if I push past the signals of my body, I'm going to be less effective and less productive in what I want to accomplish.
It is the second time that you mentioned something about taking the time
Yeah.
to see the signs, but we never take the time. I mean, when we are in a task, we are on it. It's like just before this conversation, I was spending 2 hours and I didn't see the time go because I was focused on
Yeah.
I need to finish this before talking with Marisol. So we don't see the time. So is that maybe one of the core problems? Is that people do not take the time to take the temperature about how do I feel
Yes.
emotionally? How do I feel in terms of
hmm
level of stress? And how
hmm
can people do it? This little thing of taking the time.
Oh gosh, I love that you mentioned this because this is what I say all the time whenever I'm presenting or whenever I'm talking to people is If there is a way in your day you can just program, really, not even 1 minute, a 30-second check-in. And so what I used to do when I would drive to my office before I saw clients is every time I would turn off the car, that was my signal that I need to check in. Like, how am I feeling? What's happening? Like, and just like take a minute to take a breath. 30 seconds to just check in with yourself will help you understand what it is you need to do within that day. So if I'm feeling tired, maybe I need to adjust my schedule. If I feel like I have a lot of energy, maybe this is the day where I do the project I didn't want to do. It's really programming those everyday things that you do and just adding on a 30-second to 1 minute check-in. So if it's like every time I have my coffee in the morning, I'm just going to check in with myself. Every time I open my laptop, I think that's probably what most people do, when they start their day now. Check in. Set a timer, maybe halfway through my day, check in. How am I doing? It takes 30 seconds and it can transform how you're feeling. And then that has an impact.
Mm.
I always tell people when we are constantly living in a state outside of what we call our window of tolerance. So our window of tolerance is when we have the ability to think and feel at the same time. So I can think about what I'm doing and I can feel what's happening. And once we're outside of that window, then we're not really present. We're really wearing down the nervous system. And when we do that chronically, like I said, there's going to be physiological and emotional impacts later in life. But conversely, if we just add in, I'm going to take 3 minutes, 1 minute, just to like notice, take a breath, try to calm myself, that's also going to have an impact. It's going to help your nervous system reset. And all of those things have an impact in the long term. So I think if we just add in those tiny check-ins and then build from there, it has a significant impact.
I love the fact that you have mentioned at least two of my favorite topics. One is habit formation. So by having
Yes.
a trigger that will remind you to do a new action, you can really change. And this action
Hmm.
could be tiny, as the 30
Tiny.
seconds that you have mentioned.
Hmm.
People do not realize. They think that, yeah, I will have the time to recharge in next time that I take holidays.
Hmm.
No ways. It is
No.
about the small little things that you will do in the day, and that has more
Hmm.
value, more compounded value than the bloody
Yes.
holidays with your kids who are going to stress you out even more.
Yeah, exactly. I always say that more often than not, and I'm sure you know this too. Whenever we live in that chronic state where we keep pushing past, and we're like, I just have to wait until June, and then I'm going to take 2 weeks off, and it's going to be amazing. And what typically happens is because you've worn down your nervous system and your physiological body so much, people typically get sick. They go on their vacation and they have to sleep or they're sick because their body is finally letting down. And then people don't actually feel well once they get to their vacation and they feel like it's wasted. So you're absolutely right. It's like that those little things that you add in have a compounded impact
Mm.
and so much more meaningful than going on that vacation.
And the second point that you mentioned is the fact that uh, this small window that we have between thinking and feeling, which made me think about, I mean, is one of the principles of mindfulness. In fact,
Yeah.
the fact that you can train yourself in the same way that we get trained without knowing about certain beliefs. I don't know. I'm not made for mathematics, or I cannot
Yes.
do
Right.
certain things.
Right.
Uh, in the same way, we can train our body to recognize, to feel ourselves, and think at the same time, to use the two sides
Mhm.
of our brain at the same time, so that we are
Right.
objective. We are not in this
Hmm.
constant autopilot, just going with the flow, and
Exactly.
during the day, instead of realizing when to stop or when to continue. Mm.
Absolutely. The more that we stay on autopilot and we don't notice what's happening with us, then we're essentially sleepwalking through life, right? I mean, you know that piece, but then we don't, again, our emotions are just information. Like you said, they're just information about what's happening for myself and what's happening in the world around me. And the more we tune into that, people are much more effective in their just day-to-day lives, in their relationships and work. And so the more that you can do that, the better you are just overall in life. Is just learning how to observe what I'm feeling and not pushing off your emotional life, which I think, like, part of the cultural, I think one of the cultural pressures that we feel is, emotions are like, ugh, they're irritating. I don't need to listen to them, whatever. Like, I'm not an emotional person. And emotions are really fundamentally who we are. Our
Mm,
emotions are like, they make the core of us as humans. And I think when we push past them, we don't honor our own humanity. And, we're just here to be humans. We're not here to be productivity robots. We're here to be human and understand ourselves and listen to ourselves and really understand what our own emotional life.
mm. People believes that when you're feeling burnout, it means that you're going to feel stress, highly stressed or with anxiety. But I mean, because of personal experience, I can say that it's not the only thing. And I didn't know back then what could be these signs that sometimes we misinterpret when we are on the path to burnout. Is there any signs that we should
Hmm.
be able to recognize beyond just
Oh,
this anxiety?
absolutely. I think part of it can be just it, like that, kind of what do they call them, the Sunday scaries? You have that Sunday night dread where you're like, oh God, I gotta like do this all over again. So and then it impacts our sleep habits. I know that when I'm in a state of chronic stress or I'm in burnout, my sleep is disturbed and I can't sleep, or I feel like I'm overthinking, or I'm having thoughts of anxiety. There's usually, I think, overall, we have a decreased participation in activities that we enjoy. So we're just highly focused on whatever we're doing, and we're not, taking time for friends or taking time for family or doing the things that we love. So we start to decrease our engagement in those things. And we feel, again, that physical tension. We have difficulty maintaining boundaries. So we tend to blur the line between work and personal life, where it's like, okay, I know I have to like be present for my family, but I got to like do this thing and I need to like keep doing it. And we tend to ignore what people are telling us. I know that when I go through periods of burnout, people are like, maybe you should slow down. And I'm like, whatever, leave me alone. And that's usually when I know this is a sign. I think we have our own specific signs. I always joke that one of my signs is that I tend to become very hyper, like aroused at home, and I start to get really irritable. And one of the things that I do is I call it like we're all gonna clean this right now. So I start yelling at everyone in the house, like, this is a mess, and I start like shuffling papers and like cleaning up in front of everyone, and everyone's like, whoa, you need to bring it down. But I'm like, oh, that's a sign for me that it's too much, that I'm getting close to that state of burnout.
In fact, burnout is very often misunderstood because when you discuss with people who have never paid attention, in fact, it's not
Hmm.
that they don't know what is burnout, they have never paid
Hmm.
attention because they are
Right.
surrounded by people who have signs. They will think that it is about overworking, that is about only stress. Um, but you mentioned this little fact, this
Hmm.
Sunday feeling before going to work for something, for a job that you might hate.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes it is not even about that you have been overworking. It is more about that there is your values do not match
Yeah.
what you are doing anymore.
Yes.
Uh,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
people don't get it that this little thing it produces a stress that is in the back of your mind. and
Hmm.
that you are hating it. It's not the person that you wanted to be. Very often at the age of 40, we start asking ourselves the big questions. What did I want when I was 15 to 20? And then you are just pushing papers or doing beautiful presentations and bullshitting them for most of it. And you feel a little bit dirty. And that may affect
Yes.
you. So
Uh,
for you, is it a big component of the burnout population? This I know that it's called cognitive dissonance,
mhm.
where you are living a life that you didn't want, basically.
Yes,
Is it a big part?
absolutely. Yeah, I think that there are two parts that are really, I think there's the primal part, and then there's like, again, this social pressure that we feel. So I think there's the primal part is that, our whether you believe in evolution or not, but we all evolved from something. Part of evolution is that our nervous system is built to protect us from threat or potential threat. So we're always, kind of looking out for, the bear in the woods. Like our brains are just hardwired that way. It's very primal. And that helps, sustain humanity over, millennia. But what happens is we don't have those same threats as hunters and gatherers. I'm not out trying to
Mm,
get my own food and I don't need that level of safety. But our brains respond to what perceived threat in the same way. So when I'm feeling that like, oh, I don't want to do this, there's a sense that there's something threatening in my experience that is making me feel the way that I am. And so I think there's that primal part, but I also think what you're saying in terms of the misalignment with values is I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But I'm not listening to that message. And so I have to keep pushing past it because of the societal pressure to do or be or, whatever that is. I think I always talk about how, growing up, um, there was never a time, which is, I think, very for a Latinx family here in the United States is probably, is from an immigrant family, is not always the case. But I always knew that I was going to go to college. There was never a question in my mind. My family never said, you're going to college. I just knew. It was part of just the culture of my family. And there was a lot of pressure, I think, that I felt within my family to be successful, to like achieve more, to do more because of the sacrifices that they made. And I probably made some choices based on those pressures, and it was misaligned from who I was because I wasn't really tapping into like, what are my real values? What do I really want to do? How does that make sense in this world? Even as a therapist, I'm retiring from clinical work. I became a therapist. I invested in, getting my master's. And
mm,
so I probably did it longer than I should have because I felt like I have to do this. This is who I am in the world. This is how people know me. And so I was probably way burnt out 10 years ago, maybe, and I should have stopped, but I
mm,
didn't because of all of those beliefs, all of those voices that I took in. And so I think that there's so many, I think there's the physiological part of us that like it's just who we are, how we're built, and then there's the cultural piece, that societal pressure and the things that we succumb to in order to be okay or to, I guess do the things that we believe we should do.
mm. Let's talk a little bit solutions.
Yeah.
What what would you say are the some common productivity hacks that might actually
Yes.
be bullshit, counterproductive?
Yeah. Oh, some things that are counterproductive. Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
let's start with the opposite because
Yeah.
Marisol, I have read hundreds of books about
Oh, me
how to
too.
be productive. I have followed podcasts.
Hmm.
Tim Ferriss has been my hero for a couple of years. Then
Yeah.
I hated him, and then I loved him again when he had this interview with Gabor Mate, in fact, the
Oh,
trauma guy.
yeah. Come on. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Uh,
then I loved him again because then I understood that he's suffering out of all these productivity things that he's doing. So, what are the things that books, people are advising us that
mhm.
are bullshit?
100%. And I do. I love Tim Ferriss too, and I really appreciated so much of the work that he's done, and especially in the field of trauma. And one of the things I think you see his trajectory. is that now that he understands his childhood trauma, he's probably was reacting from that. That a
Mhm.
lot of his productivity, what is it, the 4 hour work week or whatever that is, was probably all in response to his unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
So I love seeing that path for him. But I think what happens, because I also am like a self-help junkie too. I love hearing about like what are the things that we can do to make our lives more effective and productive. But I think a lot of times what we fall into the trap of is if I just like make a better schedule, if I do time for deep work, if I wake up earlier, that all of those things are going to impact. Really and truly, I think conversely, what I'm starting to understand more and more is that if you actually build in more time for rest, the more productive you'll be, and the more your life will open up to creativity, which is really, I think, it's so important. I try to take one full day where I don't do anything, where I just like, sometimes I'll do nice things for myself, but I'm like, I'm not going to do any work. I'm just going to like allow myself to be like, take a walk or read a book and all of that is so important. So it's not about making your calendar more effective. It's actually probably reducing the amount of things that you do. I think the other thing is like, this is my like worst one, I think, is again, your morning routine. It's such bullshit. Don't do it. Like,
I have to forget the 5 a.m. club from Team. What's his name? Sharma. I forgot his first name.
yeah, forget the 5 a.m. club. If you're tired, rest. If you wake up early, wake up early. You know what I mean? Like, do the things that feel good to you. If it and I think it's maybe some of those things do work, but I think we fall into the trap that if I don't do all of those things, then I'm not going to be the like most optimized human. And really, the best thing is to like accept that humans are just flawed and we're not, again, productivity machines. We're just like trying to make sense of the world, trying to understand ourselves. Some days are going to be great, some days aren't. And like the more we can move toward acceptance of that, I think it's the better.
Mm. But that's something that for these productivity people who are looking for more information is very difficult to understand the concept of allowing yourself to fail from whatever
Yes.
routine of productivity you have, to just to love yourself, be a little bit, have a little bit of pity
Yeah.
of yourself, and say, okay, what the hell, I didn't do it. That was the reason. Move on. Don't.
Move on. That's been my greatest, I think, learned productivity hack is self-compassion.
Mm,
Like the harder we are on ourselves, the less likely we are to do the thing that we desire to do. The more I have compassion and grace for myself, and like you said, sometimes I do the things I want to do. Like I do a couple of, I have my gratitude journal that I do. I have another journal that I do at night, just self-reflection. Some days I do it, some days I don't. And
mm.
then you know what I do? I pick it up the next day and I keep going. And I just have a lot of compassion for myself rather than having to like move toward perfectionism and that self-compassion opens up so much more space for me.
Mm. There is a topic that just came to my mind, and is the the level of self-awareness that we have, because sometimes we don't have the right metrics about what success in life means. So
Yeah,
I just give an example. Now you in your country, they're talking about Elon Musk all the time. But there was years where Elon Musk was a hero because he was sleeping only 4 hours, he was making millions and millions of dollars, and because of that, we are listening to what he says.
right.
But is he the right role model to take? Is that the measure of perfection or success in life that we need to have? The billions of dollars that today he has. That's the big question. How can we
Absolutely.
understand what is success in our life,
Yeah,
where maybe money could be a contributor, but it's not the thing?
absolutely. I think that's 100% true. It's like, what are our metrics of success? Like, there's this um when we think about kind of the existential part of life. So when we think about this idea that we're all going to die.
Mm,
And that's actually really useful. Sometimes we don't like to reflect on our own mortality, but it's super useful because it helps us know. I know that I'm going to die. My life will end. So what do I want at the end of my life? Who do I want to be? What do I want to be remembered for? And if I can get really clear on that, then I can understand like where I want to spend most of my time. Like I want people to remember me as someone who like loved them really well and added meaning to their life. So that means I'm super focused on relationships and relationship building. All the other stuff I don't care. I mean, I care about it, but I don't care about it. Essentially, it's not at the top of my list. So I think when you look at figures like Elon Musk, I'll tell you what, it wasn't his 4 hours of sleep that got him to be successful. It was a wealthy family
Mm.
who invested in this stuff. It wasn't the 4 hours of sleep. And so I think
Yeah.
we have to like zoom out and look at the whole picture because then
Yes.
you're sending people the wrong message that somehow if I just don't take care of myself, if I live this life where I'm sleeping less, not thinking about my own well-being and health, but that's the way I get to success and it's not. And if you look at most examples of people who are in the millions, billions, it's typically because they had help, not because they didn't sleep.
You mentioned something that is quite important. This feeling that we are going to die, that we are mortal, and this is the choice. If we want to do
Mhm.
certain things, we have to do it in this life and probably now, not later, because shit can
Right.
happen. But this is very difficult to understand when you have, in most of the religions, in fact, there is a big belief that we have a second chance,
A
that
second
in our
chance, yeah.
that if we say sorry, we are going to go to heaven, and we have a second chance to live forever. Uh, i- you're going to laugh, Marisol, but probably you understand this because of this Latino culture. I was in Latin America during Christmas, and I spoke with a childhood friends that I had. I mean, we were friends 35 years ago, 40 years ago, back in Latin America, and he was telling me he couldn't believe that for me, this is the life and there is nothing else because I don't
Mm,
have the frame of reference for him that he was completely religious, that there is
right.
a life afterwards, that there is something happening, that whatever is his heaven idea. But, and I tell him that doesn't determine the person that I am now. The values, the principles that I have in life are determined by having a life because I choose to live in a correct way without religion, putting religion
Right.
aside. For him,
Mhm.
it's more valid that but he has the expectation that he will have another chance in the next life.
Mm,
He
hmm.
works hard, if he does certain things that is expected from him. But what I'm saying is that it is more difficult to be aware about the mortality if you have a religion or a
Yeah.
philosophical belief that makes you believe that you are going to reincarnate or that is something after this.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. As you say that, what comes to mind is, my husband's family is very religious, and they're what we would term as evangelical Christian here in the United States. And I do think that a lot of their motivation is hopefully we'll be together in the next life, you know. And so then it changes the way that you make decisions, like you said about this life. Like
Exactly.
and rather than think maybe you should focus on the fact that this is finite, the
Mm,
possibility that there isn't an afterlife is there too. And what does that mean for you to do something more meaningful here that just doesn't involve the afterlife? So I
yeah.
do think that it definitely pulls us away from being present in our current experience because we're constantly thinking about, either it's meritorious, I have to keep doing the things to get to heaven, or I have to keep getting other people to do the things so that they can get to heaven so we can all be together. It doesn't allow you to be present in this moment in time.
Yeah, it's like you are postponing happiness. Happiness will happen afterwards.
Yeah.
And I have done all this.
Yes. Yeah. I'm like, no, thank you. I want to graduate from life school. I don't know what that means, but so I'm going to try my hardest while I'm here. And I think that means like understanding, like you said, having that self-awareness and then really learning how to understand and love other people.
Mm, exactly. Is there a way that, I mean, imagine that I'm someone. not, don't imagine. I am really somebody who plans a lot of things. I have planning papers all over. And I want to
Yeah.
design a way to have um, my work and my personal life that promotes sustainable productivity. That's something that is not, okay, I'm going to do a run tonight and I'm not going to sleep to deliver something for one of my
Yeah.
clients, but something
Yeah.
that is sustainable. Is there a way to design it?
Yeah, I think so. So I think it comes back to that question of values. So I do work with people and I have them identify like what are your core values now?
Mm,
And look at them every month because every month they change. The values or the my values right now, like if you were to ask me like what's going to be like your primary like what are you focused on right now? And I would say, I'm really focused on making sure that I'm doing a lot of work now in order to build for the future so that there's less stress,
mm,
in the summer. And then in February, it's going to be totally different. Like, what am I focused on? And it could be, every November, I'm like, I'm focused on my birthday month, which drives my family crazy. But it's like I'm focused on relationship building and taking time off. So I think really assessing what is your value, like what's your prioritization every single month, and then allow yourself to focus on that knowing that it's fluid. Like I think we constantly are like, I need to put this system in place and then I need to follow it rigidly every month. And I'm not doing it, then, I'm going to get off track. I think it's doing a lot of self-reflection and assessment about what's going to be the main priority next month. How do I start to cultivate my schedule based on that prioritization? And then how do I kind of let other things fall away and know that they can come back?
mm. So somehow it is still like you have a system in place, but it's continuous iteration, it's revision about,
Yes.
okay, did I change my priorities or my values? Did they change? And then revising. It can be every month. It can be every 2 months. But it's important to have this fluidity because, as you say, nothing stays forever. You cannot plan 12 months. Even when we are talking about companies, organizations that have all the
No.
science on finance, you cannot plan shit. Yeah.
Never, never. Yes, it's always going to be there's never a time when it's like my 12-month plan, my quarterly plan, my 5-year plan goes exactly the way that I want it to. It's a constant iteration. And I think learning that flexibility with yourself is important that do the evaluation. Like sometimes you're going to be like, you know what, this month is going to be, or sometimes I have weeks that are just, no matter how much I plan, they're just going to be hard. They're just going to be busy. And then I have to make the conscious effort to say, you know what, next week, give myself more space to rest.
Mm,
Don't stay in that state. Be reflective about what your weeks and days look like and how you can just reevaluate every month based on what is important to you that month.
mm. Now, another angle that I wanted to touch, Marisol, it is about resilience. So this word has been
Yeah.
used and overused during COVID so many times that I even have
I
a
know.
problem to pronounce it. Uh,
I know. I know.
but
I know. It's like, what does it even mean anymore?
exactly, has been overused. So I was wondering if we think about the normal employee and in life, in business, so we will have some certain interactions that are not neither aggressive, but that they are neutral, and then we perceive them as something that is hurting. Is there a way to for employees or people in general to build resilience to better cope with the stress, which is normal in companies? So we are working, and it's normal that there is a certain level of pressure. What is
Hmm.
not normal is
Hmm.
that it's continuous.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
is there a way to build it? Is there some tips or exercises that people can do in order
Hmm.
to cope
Yeah.
better?
Yeah, I always tell people first and foremost, if you think about what are my markers, like what are the signals that I know are true for me that help me know that I'm getting to that place of burnout. And more I can we stay what I call that window of tolerance. Every day I'm thinking about, am I in my window of tolerance or am I out of my window of tolerance? The more you do that, the more you build resilience. So the longer I stay in that window of tolerance every single day, the more capacity and resilience I build. So I think
Ah,
that's step one. The second thing is to lean into difficult emotions.
Mm,
So typically we try to avoid difficult emotions. And when we avoid difficult emotions, we typically create more stress in our life. So I actually think this is something that I got from Tim Ferriss. This is something, and I've been using it in my life recently. So I think the advice that he gave, and I might get it wrong, so I'm sorry, Tim Ferriss. But he said, think of two things that are causing you emotional distress. So it could be like, I have to send that email, I have to make that phone call, I have to work on that proposal, like whatever it is that's like has an emotional charge. Name those two things in the morning and do one of them because that's going to alleviate that stress and build more capacity and resilience because you're leaning into the difficult thing as opposed to moving away from it.
mm,
And so I've been trying that and I think that really helps. So, I think when you're in an organization, if there's something that's weighing on you, lean into it and do it because it's going to alleviate some of that, the things that I think fight against our resilience. I think the other thing is, and I know this is like so simplistic and I hate saying it, but it's really developing the capacity for gratitude.
mm,
So I do have a propensity to, we all as humans have a propensity to negative thinking, but I think because of my childhood, the way that I grew up, I'm definitely more of a like, I have a propensity to like look at the negative because I'm constantly scanning, like, okay, what's the next thing I need to look for? So I'm constantly very intentional about developing that sense of gratitude because it really helps build our capacity to be able to do what we want to do and to be able to overcome adversity, which is really what resilience is about.
mm. So, when you are talking about resilience, I think even the three suggestions that you have given are related to mindfulness. So, taking the
Mm-hmm,
time to understand your window of tolerance is something that
mm-hmm,
if you don't have the check-ins, it could be through breathing exercises or whatever
mm-hmm.
way your 30 seconds of yourself check-in, the leaning in difficult or difficult situations, and
Yeah,
even gratitude is a part of the world of mindfulness. And
yeah,
it's such a pity. In fact, Marisol, I have to be sincere that psychologists are not talking about it enough. So you
yeah.
hear about it from people who have been practicing. I still remember this guy who was the news presenter and wrote a book about mindfulness or
Oh, I
about
know exactly
meditation.
who it's. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He wrote the book 10% Happier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
That one. So, but I don't feel like psychologists are talking about enough
yeah.
and to explain the science behind what's happening in our brain, behind this little concept of mindfulness that when you hear it the first time, you think that, oh, this is for some hippies who wants to who
Hmm.
goes around with yoga mat and having ganja in the beach. No, it is not. There is
Yeah.
science, but people have to read it. But and there is not enough psychologists, psychiatrists talking about it. Mm.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that part of it is people just generally have a difficult time being with themselves. And part
Yeah,
of mindfulness is just having to be with yourself
yeah.
and just be quiet and notice without judgment. And so I think people, I think partly in the profession of therapy, I always tell people, clients always come in and they say, tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I said, that's not how human beings work. I'll tell you exactly what to do and you'll never do it because we have to come to it on our own. And I think partly it's like giving ourselves that space in our calendar, like I do once a week, allows myself the opportunity to be with myself. And I think if you just build that muscle, that's the important thing. And I think sometimes with therapists, we're constantly trying to get people like, just be quiet for a little bit, just build a mindfulness, do, like 30 seconds a day, and people don't want to do it.
Mm,
Um, and so I think it's like us building that capacity to like take the couple of steps before to help people learn how to like really be mindful.
mm. I want to ask you this question. Imagine that you have all the powers of the world. So you are like Harry Potter with mega powers in the world, and you can change the world and initiate. When can we learn this building capacity, resilience? If you had to pick the moment that would be adequate to help human beings, survive in the longer future? Because I'm pretty sure that if we continue with this burnout crisis, we will not be surviving in 100 years, or will we
Yeah.
be on medication all the time. What would you change? Would you change that people learns that in primary school, in secondary school?
Mm,
How would you see it in order to, if you had
mm.
all the power of the world?
Oh man, that's such a great question. If I had all the powers in the world, I think what I would do is I would help people get the support that they need in order to overcome their trauma early. Because really, if you think about a lot of our challenges, whether
Mm?
that be substance use disorder, mental health issues, it's really about not getting the support that people needed when they had early trauma.
Uh-huh.
And so that would be is that we would create a system in a world where people could get the support and the resources that they need early on to get that help, because that's ultimately going to change the world. I really truly believe that. I think that there's so many people who are suffering very young. They're young children who are suffering that don't get that intervention and support that they need. And if they did, it would be transformative.
Mm. That's totally right. And but that made me think also about technology. So you are about this spotting
Yeah.
people in pain is very difficult to do it human by human, like because we will have to interact with everybody in order to understand if some people are in pain. So can technology help us do better on that detection? Imagine that.
Mm,
And what is crazy, Marisol, is that I see some young people who is working with me in social media. He speaks, tells everything to the AI, to ChatGPT, and and I can tell you. So the new generation, is going to be telling every single thing to AI, and
yeah,
maybe that could be something that AI can learn to not to tell you what to do. I still believe that our brains understand better another human that rather than a
yeah.
bot
I
telling
agree.
you what to do.
Yeah,
But at
yeah.
least the detection that there is some early signs, it could be done by technology. What are your thoughts about the support of technology uh, towards either trauma or burnout? Is it something that will help?
I think it can. I mean, obviously, with every thing, especially when it comes to technology, there's always going to be the other side. I think, there's always a the other side, the dark side. We tend to like look at the dark side. But I do think there are some advantages. I was recently with a group of people and we had a full conversation about what is AI, what's coming, and how do we respond to it. And they had different areas where we could look at and interact with different types of AI. And one of the things was one, I think two that I thought were very interesting related to the work that I do was like you said, if people were in distress or needed immediate support, you could have an AI that could be responsive.
Mm,
And that could potentially change someone's life, that they can get the help that they need in that moment because you have someone that can actually respond to what's happening if it's not a human being. And so I thought that that could potentially be so helpful. And then the other part is like there's some people who need connection and relationship, but they don't have the social skills to be able
mm,
to connect with people. And so
yeah.
using AI to build some of those social skills in order to feel more confident to build relationships, that could be huge for people. Because some people feel such an isolation just because they don't know how to interact. They just didn't get the skill building that they needed for whatever reason, or they have
Mm.
other blocks. So I think it can absolutely be helpful because I think it can help people create more support systems and then, potentially get some of the support that they need if they're in crisis.
Mm. I'm fully with you. There are some sites that where it can really help on all the mental challenges that humanity is having, and of course, the real question that I ask myself very often is it worse than 20 years ago or not? Because we don't know.
Yeah,
In fact, if 20 years ago, if nobody could even define burnout 20 years ago, we don't know
right.
if there was.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's so hard to know. I think we have lots of projections about what can be, and I think there should always be guardrails, you know. with most things because we as humans need boundaries. Um, but yeah, I think we just don't know what could come. I mean, there are things that, like you said, 20 years ago that we never would have imagined, or ways that I understand the world now that I'm like, if I would have known that 20 years ago, my life would have been so much better. Um,
Exactly.
so, so I'm here. I'm open.
Marisol, is there any ways that if people have any questions to you regarding this episode, regarding burnout, regarding resilience, or regarding trauma, how can they reach you out, Marisol?
Yeah, so you can find me. You can actually contact me very easily through my web, marisolerlacher.com.
Uh-huh.
And that's typically where I spend, or I'm actually LinkedIn is the place where I spend most of my time. So same Marisol Solarte-Erlacher, you can find me there. I have a newsletter you can subscribe to. I typically put it out weekly, just talking about a lot of these things related to organizations and then individual burnout. And I'm working on putting up a little free kind of assessment, organizational assessment around chronic stress and burnout on my website. So that
Okay.
would be the best way to reach out.
Listen, I'm going to put the link about marisolelager.com, your
Yeah.
LinkedIn profile. I will put it below this episode, and I will put also the link to the newsletter because now newsletter is the thing to get information, support.
Yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. Marisol, thank you very much for your time.
Thank
Really,
you
I
so
love
much.
the discussion with you. It was lovely
I
to have.
know. Yeah, I feel like we could talk forever. Thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you, Marisol.